On the 19th of January 2025, high on Austria's tallest mountain, Kirstine's love for the peaks would lead to an unthinkable tragedy. As dawn broke over the Gross Glockner, mountain rescuers would find her motionless body just 50 meters from the summit, dead from hypothermia after being left alone in hurricane-force winds by the very person she trusted most, her experienced climbing partner and boyfriend, Thomas Plamberger. Kerstin Gurtner was born on the 6th of March, 1991, in the historic city of Salzburg, Austria. From childhood, she had felt a profound connection to the natural world around her. The Austrian Alps, visible from virtually anywhere in Salzburg, called to her in a way that shaped her very identity. Those who knew her said she embodied the spirit of someone truly at home in winter's embrace. Her social media profiles painted the portrait of an active, adventure-loving woman who found joy in the mountains year-round. Whether she was hiking through summer meadows, skiing down pristine slopes, or capturing the golden light of an alpine sunset, Kirstine seemed most alive when surrounded by peaks and valleys. Her colleagues at the communications company where she worked noted that she was determined but cautious on extreme adventures. This wasn't someone who took unnecessary risks or threw caution to the wind. She approached the mountains with respect, understanding that they demanded preparation and sound judgment. Kirstine's dedication to fitness was evident in her participation in the Wings for Life world-run charity events from 2020 to 2024. In the 2024 Vienna flagship run, she completed approximately 20 kilometers, ranking 2,831st globally. This wasn't just casual weekend hiking. This was someone who maintained the physical conditioning necessary for serious mountain adventures. But there was a crucial detail about Kirstine that would prove central to the tragedy ahead. Despite her love for the mountains and her obvious fitness, she had never undertaken an alpine high-altitude tour of significant length, difficulty, and altitude. Her mountain experience, whilst genuine, was limited to moderate routes and day hikes. She was passionate, but she was not expert. It was at ski events that Kirstine met Thomas Plamberger, a 36-year-old climber with extensive alpine experience. 3 years her senior, Thomas was described as very experienced with alpine high-altitude tours. He became her guide into more challenging terrain, introducing her to moderate climbing routes that gradually expanded her comfort zone in the mountains. Their social media told the story of a couple who shared a genuine love for outdoor adventures. Photographs showed them hiking together, climbing, rappelling, and snowboarding. Recent trips to Germany demonstrated their active lifestyle together. To anyone looking from the outside, they appeared to be well-matched partners who understood the mountains and respected their dangers. What outsiders couldn't see was the significant experience gap between them. Whilst Thomas had years of challenging high-altitude climbing behind him, Kirstine's mountain experience remained fundamentally different in scope and technical difficulty. The Gross Glockner stands at 3,798 meters, 12,461 feet, making it Austria's highest mountain. For serious climbers, it represents the ultimate Austrian objective, a peak that demands technical skill, physical fitness, and considerable mountaineering experience. The route Thomas chose for himself and Kirstine was the Studelgrat, or Southwest Ridge. This is no casual walk-up. Graded UIAA 3 to 4 in climbing terminology, roughly equivalent to 5.4, it combines technical rock climbing with extreme exposure to weather and altitude. In winter conditions, the difficulty and danger multiply exponentially. Their planned route would take them over the summit, across the subsidiary peak of Grossglockner, and down to the Erzherzog Johann Huth at Adlersruhe. It was an ambitious undertaking even for experienced alpine climbers. For someone with Kirstine's background, it represented a massive leap in technical difficulty and commitment. The route is notable for what mountaineers call the point of no return, the Frühstücksplatzel, or breakfast spot, at 3,550 meters. This location serves as the critical decision point. Beyond this elevation, the most technical climbing begins, and retreat becomes increasingly difficult. Weather conditions that might be manageable lower on the mountain can become life-threatening above this point. What made the couple's January attempt particularly concerning, prosecutors would later argue, was Kirstine's equipment choices. She wore soft snowboard boots rather than the rigid mountaineering footwear essential for technical alpine climbing. She carried a splitboard instead of proper alpine gear. Most critically, she lacked adequate emergency bivouac equipment, the shelter and survival gear that can mean the difference between life and death when things go wrong high on a mountain. Thomas, as the experienced partner, had planned the entire expedition. In legal terms, this made him what prosecutors would later call the responsible guide. With that role came duties: to assess his partner's capabilities, to ensure proper equipment, to make sound decisions about when to continue and when to turn back. Friday, the 18th of January 2025, began before sunrise for Kirstine and Thomas. At 6:45 a.m., they departed from the car park near Glockner House in Cals, beginning what they hoped would be a successful winter ascent of Austria's highest peak. But prosecutors would later point to this start time as the first critical error. They alleged that departing at 6:45 a.m. was 2 hours later than advisable for such an ambitious undertaking. In winter, alpine climbing, early starts aren't just about comfort, they're about safety. Every hour of daylight is precious, and the margin for error shrinks dramatically once darkness falls. Initially, their progress seemed reasonable. By 9:30 a.m., they reached the Studelhütte. The weather was cold but manageable, and both climbers appeared to be moving well. Nothing suggested the horror that lay ahead. At 1:30 p.m., the pair reached the Frühstücksplatzel, the critical turnaround point at 3,550 meters. This was the moment that would haunt the investigation for months to come. Weather conditions had deteriorated significantly. Wind speeds reached 74 kilometers per hour, with temperatures of -8 degrees Celsius and wind chill approaching -20 degrees Celsius. Every mountaineering textbook, every climbing guide, every piece of conventional wisdom says the same thing. This is when you turn around. This is when experience and judgment override summit fever and ego. But they didn't turn around. The defense would later claim that neither Kirstine nor Thomas were exhausted or overwhelmed at this point, so they continued. The prosecution would argue that this decision, to proceed past the turnaround point in deteriorating conditions, was the moment that sealed Kirstine's fate. As afternoon became evening, webcam footage from the nearby Erzherzog Johann Hütte captured 2 headlamps ascending high on the mountain. By approximately 6 p.m., darkness had fallen completely. The pair were now climbing in conditions that would challenge even the most experienced mountaineers: technical rock and ice, sub-zero temperatures, high winds, and complete darkness. At 8:50 p.m., the couple became effectively unable to continue their journey. Kirstine began showing signs of severe exhaustion approximately 30 to 50 meters below the summit cross. They were stranded on an exposed snow ramp with virtually zero visibility and hurricane-force winds. What happened next would become the most controversial aspect of the entire case. At 10:50 p.m. on the 18th of January, Alpine police monitoring webcams identified 2 lights high on the Gross Glockner. Despite dangerous flying conditions, they immediately dispatched the police helicopter Libelle to investigate. The helicopter crew made visual contact with the stranded climbers and shone powerful lights down onto them. This was a moment of potential salvation, a chance for the couple to signal distress and initiate immediate rescue procedures. No distress signal was given. The defense would later claim that at this moment, both climbers were feeling well and were not far from the summit. There was no emergency, they argued. The prosecution would counter that Kirstine had already collapsed from exhaustion and hypothermia. and that this represented a critical missed opportunity to save her life. The helicopter circled for some time before departing. The pilots had seen 2 lights, 2 people, but no indication that help was needed. They couldn't land in the brutal conditions, but they could have initiated a complex nighttime rescue operation if they'd received any signal of distress. At 12:35 a.m. on the 19th of January, Alpine police finally managed to reach Thomas by phone after multiple failed attempts. The contents of this conversation remain unclear, but what happened immediately afterward would prove crucial to prosecutors' case. After hanging up, Thomas put his phone on silent mode and stored it away. He became unreachable for all subsequent rescue coordination attempts. For the next several hours, as conditions worsened and Kirstine's situation became increasingly desperate, emergency services could not contact the one person who knew exactly where they were and what was happening on the mountain. At 2 a.m. came the moment that would define the entire case. According to the official prosecution statement, the defendant left his girlfriend unprotected, exhausted, hypothermic, and disoriented approximately 50 meters below the summit cross of the Gross Glockner. Prosecutors allege that Thomas failed to take basic survival measures before abandoning Kirstine. He didn't move her to a wind-sheltered position. He didn't deploy her bivouac sack or use available aluminium emergency blankets. He didn't even remove her heavy backpack and splitboard, leaving her burdened with unnecessary weight as she fought hypothermia and exhaustion. At 2:30 a.m., webcam footage captured a single light beginning its descent towards the other side of the mountain. Thomas was leaving. Kirstine remained behind, alone, exposed to winds that would soon reach hurricane force. The defense would later claim this separation happened by mutual agreement, that it was a desperate plan to get help as quickly as possible. The prosecution would argue it was abandonment, pure and simple. At 3:30 a.m., Thomas made another emergency call, informing rescue services that he had left his girlfriend behind and requesting helicopter assistance. By then, weather conditions made any aerial rescue completely impossible. From 2 a.m. until 10:10 a.m. the following morning, Kerstin Gurtner lay motionless on an exposed slope just 50 meters from the summit of Austria's highest mountain. GPS data from her sports watch would later show that she stopped moving around 4 a.m. and remained completely still for the next 6 hours. She was dying alone in the cold whilst her boyfriend descended to safety. Dawn on the 19th of January brought no relief. At 7 a.m., a helicopter rescue attempt had to be called off due to hurricane-force winds. The weather, that had been dangerous the night before, had become absolutely impossible by morning. The only option was a ground rescue. The Bergrettung Karls mountain rescue team began an arduous 5-hour ascent on touring skis, fighting the same brutal conditions that had claimed Kirstine's life. At 10:10 a.m., the rescue team reached Kerstin Gurtner. The GPS data from her sports watch told a story that would haunt everyone involved. She had remained completely motionless for approximately 6 hours. Medical experts would later confirm that at high altitude without proper shelter, hypothermia can progress to death within 30 minutes. Kirstine had died from hypothermia, alone on Austria's highest peak, just 50 meters from a summit she would never reach. Her body was carefully evacuated from the mountain, beginning a process that would lead to one of the most controversial mountaineering prosecutions in recent memory. The Innsbruck Public Prosecutor's Office launched what would become an exhaustive 11-month investigation. They confiscated both climbers' mobile phones, analysed GPS data, studied weather reports, and interviewed mountaineering experts. Every decision made on the mountain would be scrutinised in forensic detail. The digital evidence proved particularly revealing. Kirstine's sports watch had recorded her final hours with chilling precision. Investigators could see exactly when she stopped moving, how long she lay motionless, and the GPS coordinates of her final position. Webcam footage from Photo Webcam provided a visual timeline of the tragedy. 2 lights ascending at dusk, 1 light descending alone at 2:30 a.m., The story was written in pixels and GPS coordinates. When the investigation concluded in December 2025, prosecutors had identified what they called 9 critical failures that led to Kirstine's death. First, taking an inexperienced partner on this route in winter conditions. Second, starting the ascent 2 hours too late. Third, not carrying sufficient emergency bivouac equipment. Fourth, allowing Kirstine to use unsuitable equipment. Fifth, not turning back at the Frühstücksplatz when conditions deteriorated. Sixth, failing to call emergency services before nightfall. Seventh, not signalling distress to the helicopter at 10:50 p.m. Eighth, putting his phone on silent after the midnight call. And ninth, failing to properly shelter Kirstine before abandoning her. Thomas Plamberger was charged with grossly negligent homicide under Section 81 of the Austrian Criminal Code. This is more severe than simple negligent homicide. It requires prosecutors to prove exceptionally and conspicuously negligent conduct, where danger to life was clearly recognizable and elementary safety rules were disregarded. The legal theory was straightforward. Thomas, as the experienced partner who had planned the expedition, had a duty of care toward Kirstine. By failing in that duty through a cascade of poor decisions, he had caused her death. Attorney Kurt Jelinek mounted a vigorous defense of Thomas Plamberger, challenging the prosecution's entire theory of criminal negligence. Jelinek argued that both climbers were equally capable and had planned their climb together. The tragedy was not criminal negligence, but unforeseeable circumstances in an inherently dangerous environment. Kirstine's deterioration was completely unexpected and objectively unforeseeable, happening suddenly after the helicopter departed. Thomas denied any wrongdoing. His since-deleted Instagram tribute read, "I miss you so much. It hurts so incredibly much. Forever in my heart." He also co-signed Kirstine's obituary with her parents. The case sparked intense debate throughout the mountaineering community about responsibility and duty of care between climbing partners. Willie and Damien Benegas, award-winning IFMGA guides, offered pointed analysis. The real mistakes began the day before, when he decided to take her to climb this mountain in winter on this technical route. They added, "If you have more experience and fitness, your job is not to bring your partner to your level. Your job is to go down to their level." French guide Frédéric Degoulet described the familiar pattern. It's one mistake, followed by another and another. You dig, 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 you're ashamed to admit you're wrong, and then you're in a position where it's too late. The case drew comparisons to the 2018 Haute Route disaster, where 7 skiers died from similar cascading poor decisions. Adventure magazine noted the disparity in safety standards. Maritime law ensures life jackets are carried. Yet, on mountains, responsibility has historically been governed more by culture than regulation. Thomas Plamberger's trial is scheduled for the 19th of February 2026 at Innsbruck Regional Court. If convicted of grossly negligent homicide, he faces up to 3 years in prison.